Welcome to AMC Online and today's presentation on celebrating holidays in the USA. Your speaker today will be Erin Concourse. Erin is a public affairs officer for the U.S. Consulate in Vladivostok, though she is currently working from Moscow due to the pandemic. During her career in Washington, D.C., St. Petersburg, and Sarajevo, she has had a unique chance to experience different cultural traditions through her travels and says that these experiences have opened up the world to her. Erin's presentation tonight will focus on different cultural traditions in the United States and diverse U.S. holidays such as Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Ramadan, and more. At the end of the presentation, Erin welcomes your questions on any of the holidays.
Thank you, Jahan, and I hope you all can hear me okay. I think you might be muted, Jahan.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, wonderful. Thanks for that great introduction. And as everyone watching might know, that the United States of America is often called the nation of immigrants, or this melting pot of cultures. And so I really look forward to sharing more about the very diverse cultural traditions and family holidays that we all celebrate in the United States. So if we could go ahead and share the slides, we'll go ahead and get started, if that sounds okay. Great, so welcome to this presentation on celebrating holidays in the US. And if we could go ahead to the next slide. I want to thank the American Center in Moscow for hosting this talk tonight. So what kinds of holidays are we going to cover in this talk? Well, what do we celebrate in the United States? We celebrate a range of holidays, just like here in Russia and in other countries. And these holidays include national holidays, days like Thanksgiving, which some people might call our most national of holidays or most important US holidays. Patriotic days such as Independence Day, the 4th of July. Historic holidays, remembering important events such as Martin Luther King Day and President's Day. We often celebrate cultural holidays or religious holidays. And as Jahan, as you mentioned, these can range from Christmas to Hanukkah, Easter, Ramadan, and other holidays. And finally, family traditions. Sometimes these are just smaller holidays that we remember, marking our cultural backgrounds. If we could go to the next slide. All right, so right here on this slide, you see the National Mall and the National Christmas tree that goes there every year. The United States has a very interesting tradition in the way that we celebrate holidays. We actually historically had national holidays set by our US Congress. So we set aside a number of holidays every year in which we take breaks from work, business activity, or might attend public or religious ceremonies. The US has established the following 11 permanent federal holidays by law, and tonight we're going to cover a few of them in our presentation. But by way of calendar, these holidays are New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, Inauguration Day, which happens every 4 years and is about to happen this upcoming year, 2021, George Washington's birthday, Memorial Day and Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas Day. And although Thanksgiving Day was included in this first holiday bill in 1870, it really wasn't until 1941 that Congress specifically said that the fourth Thursday of November would be the official date. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. We are going to travel through the calendar and cover the holidays in order of the calendar year. So we'll end with the holidays we're about to celebrate in December. But our first holiday of the year that we usually celebrate is New Year's Day. And while in Russia, New Year's kicks off several holidays and festive events. In the United States, we really only get New Year's Day, January 1st, off from work or as a federal holiday. Although, to be fair, many of us start celebrating a little bit earlier. We might leave work a little bit early on December 31st. But Americans usually celebrate this holiday in different ways. Many of us get together with family or friends. We go to parties or small gatherings. Sometimes there's an office party or what we call a potluck, where people bring food into the office. Many of us like to watch on TV or go in person to see the crystal ball drop in New York City. So it's pictured there. It's a little bit old, this photograph, I apologize, but that is what looks like the crystal ball drop. So a couple minutes before midnight, it starts its descent, and then right at the turn of the year, it hits the bottom. Next slide, please. Okay, the next holiday, and one really important holiday, is Martin Luther King Day. So in November of 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed legislation creating a federal holiday remembering Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And this holiday celebrates a great African-American hero of our civil rights movement. And he dedicated his life to fighting for just and fair treatment of Black Americans in the United States. And Dr. King was finishing his PhD in theology in the 1950s. And at that time in our history, it was a very difficult time, one in which we experienced a segregated society. Dr. King spoke up for Black Americans who were forced to ride in the back of public buses, use separate bathrooms and eat in separate restaurants, and use separate water fountains, and other really severe injustices. So Dr. King organized and led a protest of public buses in Montgomery, Alabama. And those who boycotted the buses were arrested, attacked, and threatened. And after 1 year of these protests starting, the Supreme Court declared that the Alabama segregation law was unconstitutional. Dr. King's work throughout his life began something that was called the civil rights movement in our country. And in the years to follow, he continued to organize protests. As you see here in this picture, in 1963, he led the famous March on Washington. Today, it's quite common to see large gatherings in Washington, D.C., but at that time, it was the largest protest ever. 250,000 African Americans and others gathered in central Washington, D.C., and you can see in the picture how packed the National Mall was. Within 1 year of that march, the Civil Rights Act was passed, which guaranteed equal rights in housing, public facilities, and voting in schools. And sadly, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. But this holiday ensures that we remember every year the importance of his life. And it's on the third Monday in January. Next slide, please. Now, this holiday has become more important around the world in the last few years. I've seen it celebrated in Russia. And just a few years ago, I hadn't seen that before. And that's Valentine's Day. The history of this holiday is actually shrouded in mystery. February has long been celebrated as a month of romance. And St. Valentine's Day contains some aspects of both Christian and ancient Roman tradition. One legend says that Valentine, the day who this is named after, was a priest who served during the 3rd century in Rome. And when the emperor Claudius II decided that single men made better soldiers than young married men with wives and families, he outlawed marriage for young men. But Valentine, realizing how unjust this was, defied Claudius and continued to perform marriages for young people in secret. And when his actions were discovered, he was put to death. So he was considered a martyr after that, and we call him Saint Valentine. And after that, in the 1800s, even 1700s, in the US, people began to send Valentines to each other and even make Valentines out of paper and little scraps of fabric. And this was popularized in the late 1800s. It has evolved into a must-do holiday for many couples. People like to go to restaurants, go out to eat, buy chocolates or gifts for each other. That's how we celebrate Valentine's Day. Next slide, please. And this holiday, I believe, is probably popular both in Russia and in the United States, and that's the holiday of Easter. So many American Christians celebrate Easter, which is probably the oldest and most important holy day of the Christian calendar. I need to note that it probably at one time was mostly a religious holiday, but has somewhat evolved to become an American holiday celebrated by people who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves religious, but have children or really enjoy celebrating the Easter Bunny tradition. So in its origins, Easter commemorates the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we celebrate it sometimes different Sundays, generally in America, than the Orthodox Church does in Russia, but sometimes they coincide on the same Sunday. Many Christians observe a period of fasting and confessing their sins, 40 days leading up to the holiday. This special period is known as Lent, and it comes from an Old English word meaning spring. The Friday before Easter Sunday in particular is a day of reverence because Christians believe that was the day of the crucifixion of Jesus. And so when Lent ends on Easter, it reflects his resurrection, and many families and children go to church or have gatherings to have brunch or breakfast together for a special Easter meal. I need to talk about the legend of the Easter Bunny because the Easter Bunny is probably one of our most popular American traditions for this holiday and very, very popular with children. There is even an Easter egg hunt, Easter egg roll, I believe, on the lawn in front of the White House for this holiday. As you can see, this little girl here is dressed as a bunny. And the tradition goes that the Easter Bunny comes the night before Easter, hides eggs around the house or in the yard, and children take their empty Easter baskets in the morning and they go hunt for Easter eggs. And sometimes they receive small gifts or chocolates in their Easter baskets. And some say this tradition was actually brought in the 1700s by German immigrants who had a tradition of an egg-laying hare called the Osterhaus, which evolved into the Easter Bunny. And so this tradition came with, so it is reported anyway, with German immigrants to the United States. And I will even add that in my childhood, I was known to leave carrots out for the Easter Bunny in my house. Next slide, please. Okay, and so the next tradition, holiday I would like to speak about is Passover. And this is one of the most sacred and widely celebrated Jewish holidays in American culture. Jewish households and synagogues celebrate Passover every spring. And the name Passover comes from the traditional story from the scriptures that God passed over enslaved Jews in Egypt and saved them from a plague, allowing them to escape into freedom. And so each spring, observant Jews prepare the traditional Passover meal known as the Seder, and they retell the story of how God commanded their prophet Moses to lead the Jews out of Egypt. And according to this tradition, they wandered in the Sinai desert for over 40 years until reaching the Promised Land. As you can see in this picture, the Seder meal is very unique and comes with special foods and observances, special things to commemorate this story. And a really unique feature of Passover is that children have a very special role in this Seder meal. During the Seder, it's traditional that the youngest child asks 4 questions during the meal as a way to explain why the night is special. And children also enjoy searching for a piece of hidden matzah, which is unleavened bread, which you can kind of, I think you can see it on this table. The picture is really small on my screen, but anyway, that is, it is symbolizing how the Jews had to make a very quick escape in the night when they could not wait for their bread to rise. And then finally, Passover, the date, just like Easter, the date of Passover each year is determined by the Jewish calendar. And so every year it's on a different date. And this upcoming year, Passover will be celebrated March 27th through April 4th. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to talk about a holiday called Ramadan. And when Jahan mentioned how when I've had the opportunity to live in different countries, as we do in the Foreign Service, it's a neat opportunity to learn about new holidays and experience them with our friends and colleagues. And so when I served in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the capital city of Sarajevo, I got to experience Ramadan for the first time. Ramadan is a holy month of fasting, introspection, and prayer for Muslims. And fasting is one of the 5 principles of Islam. So during the holy month of Ramadan, Muslims do not eat from sunrise to sunset. And they break the daily fast by sharing meals with family and friends. The end of Ramadan is celebrated with a 3-day festival known as Eid al-Fitr, one of Islam's major holidays. And so it also is, Ramadan changes every year as well. It follows the Islamic calendar, and it's the 9th month of a lunar calendar that's based on phases of the moon. So this upcoming year, it will be April 12th through May 11th. And Muslims believe that around 610 AD, the Prophet Muhammad started to receive revelations from God or Allah. And these revelations were collected into a holy book known as the Quran. And so during Ramadan, this period of fasting is considered a time to practice self-restraint and self-reflection. And fasting is seen as a way to cleanse the soul and also have empathy for those in the world who are hungry and less fortunate. So your Muslim friends and colleagues who are going to work and taking care of their usual activities are doing so without eating anything or drinking water during the day. And some are reading the Quran and saying special prayers to mark Ramadan. And then this conclusion each night when the sun goes down includes an iftar dinner, and it's a very special experience to share that with your friends and neighbors. So you can see some of the special foods here at a community iftar dinner in this photo. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to turn from some cultural and religious holidays to talk about some of our national patriotic holidays. And 2 that are very important and special to us are Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And I have to say that 1 or 2 of my first and probably greatest experiences of holidays in Russia have been Victory Day, particularly going and experiencing the parades and the column, seeing veterans of the Great Patriotic War carrying photos of their loved ones. We do something similar with our families on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Growing up in my childhood, we sometimes attended special ceremonies with our grandfathers who participated in World War II. Memorial Day is the last day in May, and Memorial Day honors those who've sacrificed their lives while serving in the military. And it was actually first observed and created in 1868. It was known as Decoration Day, and it was a time for the nation to decorate the graves of our Civil War dead with flowers. Over time, it became known as Memorial Day. And after World War II, it later became a federal law to celebrate Memorial Day. Now, a lot of Americans actually don't know the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Following the end of World War I, in November of 1919, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day, ending World War I. And originally, the date was observed with parades, public meetings, and a brief suspension of business beginning at 11 a.m. Congress officially recognized the end of World War I when it passed this resolution to create this special day in 1926. And it later became known as Veterans Day. So it's a day when we honor veterans of all wars, not just those who have lost their lives. And how we celebrate both of these days is to lay wreaths at graves in cemeteries, and also to put flags at graves, as you see here pictured in the photo, Arlington National Cemetery. Now, both these holidays, particularly the warm weather coming in Memorial Day, the time frame of May usually, and the holiday I'm going to talk about next, I must say that these are not just patriotic holidays with parades and some fireworks sometimes in the evenings. They are days where we get together, we don't have to work, and we get together with our family and friends and have the good old American traditional holiday festival celebration with family, which is known as the barbecue or grilling out. So many Americans have barbecues on their patios or backyards, and they will grill meat and make salads and sides and get together with friends and family on these days. Next slide, please. So with that, our Independence Day, or the 4th of July. So I was recently asked what holiday I thought was the most important to Americans. And there are many opinions on that, and I have a few different ideas of how I would answer that question. But in terms of patriotic or national holidays, I would have to say Independence Day is very important to most Americans because of the way that our country was founded, the unlikely way that the United States of America was born, commemorating the 13 colonies and remembering how this group of colonists came together to declare their independence. That is what July 4th is all about. And that is also why many American embassies and consulates, all of us really every year, have some sort of major event, be it a picnic or a party or some sort of big dinner where we invite colleagues and friends to eat together with us. So this date remembers the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. And I couldn't think of a better way to sum up Independence Day than by quoting our second US President, John Adams, who said, "I believe that Independence Day will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be celebrated by pomp and parade with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other." And we really do that in America. In my childhood, we went to had a parade where we dressed up and we all waved flags. We also baked pies, ate ice cream, sometimes homemade ice cream, played games, and then sat by the lake and watched fireworks over the lake at the end of the day. You'll even see reenactments of people dressed up like Revolutionary War heroes and acting out how there were brave battles during the Revolutionary War. Next slide, please. Now I will turn back to a cultural holiday that is I would say one that's gotten popular in other parts of the world, because I did actually see in Vladivostok that some people were celebrating Halloween, and I was quite surprised. And this is a silly picture I pulled off of the internet from a party in the 1970s. So it's actually not, these are not modern people dressed up in costumes, but it shows that this tradition has been celebrated for many years. Every year on October 31st, people make bonfires, dress up in costumes, go out trick-or-treating, and celebrate what we call Halloween. So how did this holiday start? Well, it originated as a Celtic pagan holiday, and then it sort of evolved as November 1st was known as a time to honor All Saints. Then All Saints Day incorporated some of the traditions of this day. So the evening before was known as All Hallows Eve, and later Halloween. And then over time, this tradition of trick-or-treating, carving jack-o'-lanterns and that kind of thing, people donning costumes and eating treats, became more of a holiday. And now it's really celebrated by young people who go door to door asking for candy. And they knock on the door and say, trick or treat, and you're supposed to open the door and give candy to the kids. And next slide, please. And now we're on to one of my favorite holidays. As I mentioned earlier, some consider this to be one of our most truly American holidays. This is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving celebrates the harvest and other blessings of the past year. And Americans generally believe, though there's some debate, or I would say many perspectives on what the origins of Thanksgiving were. But generally, it's believed that Thanksgiving is modeled on a 1621 harvest feast shared by the English colonists in Plymouth, who are known as Pilgrims, and the Wampanoag people. And this holiday is rich in legend and symbolism. We have a traditional meal, which usually is turkey, bread stuffing, potatoes, cranberries, and pumpkin pie. It is a federal holiday, so we do always get the fourth Thursday of November off from work for most people. And the traditional story goes that a few colonists went out fowling, possibly looking for turkey or even geese and ducks. And a group of about 90 Wampanoag indigenous members of the community that lived there made a surprise appearance at the gate of the settlement where the colonists lived, and it unnerved them because there were much fewer colonists. But over the next few days, the two groups met and developed very beginning communications with each other, and they ended up sharing a feast. The colonists were accustomed to these regular Thanksgiving meals together, and they were very, I would say, devout or religious colonists. So they devoted themselves to prayer and thanking God for blessings such as maybe an end to a drought or just having food. And so over time, the Continental Congress, then at the foundation of our country, declared Thanksgiving as a national holiday. And it was more formalized into our country when, during the Civil War in 1863, President Lincoln proclaimed a national day of Thanksgiving to be celebrated on Thursday, November 26th. And so then later in 1941, President Roosevelt issued a proclamation making Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday of every November. And you see there this picture showing how good the food looks. But I really think that Americans like to eat generally. We gather around the table, we cook together with our families. And even people who don't have children or are single, who don't have a traditional family, a new holiday has evolved in the vein of Thanksgiving called Friendsgiving, where groups of friends get together, cook together, bring food, and share a meal. So it's a wonderful holiday. Next slide, please. And we're on to the next holiday is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a Jewish holiday, which is an 8-day wintertime festival of lights. And this year it's being celebrated December 10th through the 18th. So it started at sundown on December 10th. And to describe it, it's celebrated with nightly menorah lighting, special prayers, and special foods eaten with loved ones. The Hebrew word Hanukkah means dedication, and it is named because it celebrates the rededication of the Holy Temple. So the story goes that in the 2nd century BC, the Holy Land was ruled by the Syrian Greeks, who tried to force the people of Israel to accept their culture and beliefs instead of mitzvah observance and belief in God. And so against all odds, a small band of poorly armed Jews, led by Judah Maccabee and his brothers, who are known as the Maccabees, or now known as the Maccabees, defeated one of the mightiest armies on earth, the Syrian Greeks. And they drove them from the land and reclaimed the Holy Temple and rededicated it to God. But as they went to light the temple's menorah, which was the 7-branched candelabrum, which is pictured here at the Hanukkah menorah, they found just a small single cruse of olive oil, and they lit the menorah, and it was a 1-day supply of oil that miraculously lasted for 8 days until new oil could be prepared under the conditions of ritual purity. And so to remember and commemorate these miracles, the festival of Hanukkah developed. And so at the heart of this festival is the nightly menorah lighting. So you see here a Hanukkah menorah with a candle for each night of Hanukkah, and the middle candle is the one used to light the other candles, known as the shamash. And so how do families in America celebrate this? Well, every night they light another candle, starting with one and lighting all of the 8 at the end of the holiday. We cook special foods, potato latkes and fried donuts. And there's also a menorah on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And finally, it's worth noting that this holiday, while it falls in the darkest time of the year, as you can see, it's one that brings light and joy into people's houses. Next slide, please. And so finally, we're coming up to the end of our presentation. We'll talk about another holiday that will happen next week, and that is Christmas. And I do recognize that for our audience, Christmas in the Orthodox Church is celebrated on January 7th. So Christmas in Russia comes after New Year's. In America, it comes before New Year's. And I've heard Christmas described as Catholic Christmas, but I will note that generally Americans mostly celebrate Christmas on December 25th, whether they are Catholic or Protestant or not religious, but still celebrate it as an American holiday. So traditionally, this is a Christian holiday that celebrates the birth of Jesus. And the term Christmas means Mass on Christ's Day, and it's a fairly recent term. How do we celebrate it? Well, there are many, many different ways. For those who do attend church, they go to special church services. The Sundays leading up to Christmas are called Advent, and there are special candles lit for the season of Advent. There are carol singing, special services, and often retelling of the Christmas story, which is also known as the Nativity. And then I must say that for friends and families who celebrate, many people do go to what's called midnight mass or go to church on Christmas Eve. And these services can be very memorable because everyone receives a candle. And during the service, one candle is lit and the candles are passed from person to person and the lights are dimmed until everyone in the church is holding a lit candle with all of the lights out. So I need to add that as this has just become a major American holiday, there's a gift-giving aspect to it. Children hang stockings in their homes and believe in Santa Claus, who fills the stockings. Parents and children and brothers and sisters and cousins give gifts to each other. And of course, there's a lot of cooking and a lot of eating. If we could go to the next slide, please. I tried to attempt to capture how do Americans celebrate Christmas. Well, one big aspect of it is decorating Christmas trees. So people either go to the forest or a tree farm and they get a live tree that's cut down. In my childhood, my family actually grew Christmas trees. So I spent Saturdays and Sundays in my childhood all through December from Thanksgiving on going to help people cut down Christmas trees and serve hot chocolate. People also buy trees that are not real, but beautifully decorated, or they decorate them themselves. We exchange cookies, we bake for each other, we go singing carols. And while I think this year with the pandemic, many of the holidays we're talking about tonight probably will be celebrated a little less in person, Americans are very connected to friends and family nonetheless. And so I know many people who are planning to have Zoom get-togethers or online get-togethers with their family. We have also ugly sweater costume or ugly sweater contests or Christmas sweater contests. We had one in my office the last couple of years where the person who wears the most unique sweater gets a prize. Okay, and now I think if I could have the last slide, please. The final holiday I'd like to talk about tonight is Kwanzaa. It's not a holiday that everyone knows about, but those that celebrate it, it is known as a special family holiday. And I get questions about it sometimes here, so I wanted to talk about it tonight. Kwanzaa is both known as an African American and Pan-African holiday, and it celebrates family, community, and culture. And it is not a very old holiday from what I understand. It was created by Dr. Maulana Karenga in 1966, and it is celebrated towards the end of December, the 26th through January 1st. Kwanzaa celebrates 7 principles, and these are communicated through feasts and dance and poetry. And I want to talk about those 7 principles because they're very community-oriented and can be very inspiring. So the principles are unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, so to build and maintain our own businesses and shops and profiting together for the community, purpose, creativity, and faith. And so this holiday also involves families getting together, lighting candles, and discussing the importance of these principles in our lives. And last slide, please. I want to wish everyone a very happy holidays for whatever holidays you might be celebrating this month. And tonight we'd like to open it up to any questions, noting that the questions need to be on the topic of holidays, how Americans celebrate holidays, how Russians celebrate holidays, but it has to be focused on holidays. And I believe Jahan and I may share some of our favorite memories if no one asks any questions. So please ask some questions. And with that, we'll open the floor up.
Thank you, Erin, so much. We actually do have a couple of questions already. That was super informative. It took us all the way through the calendar of all the important American traditions and holidays, both our national holidays and our religious holidays, and also our kind of spiritual American spirit type holidays. So thank you for that. So I'm going to break one of the questions into 3 different. And the question is, do you have a favorite Christmas food? Something you have to have every Christmas, every December, or it doesn't feel like Christmas?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a great question. I would say I love turkey, and growing up, to the best of my memory, but now in my adult life, I love to make turkey and eat turkey. But I actually come from a Polish, German, Lithuanian background on one side of my family. And I have memories of special dishes being made. One is called kugele that my mom makes every year, which involves frying potatoes and onions and sausages. But I'm also a sweets person. And no matter where I am in the world, I always make my mom's recipe for chocolate chip cherry coconut bars. And the last few years between Russia, Bosnia, America, Vladivostok, and Moscow, I have managed to make this recipe in every place that I've been and made it last weekend. So that's probably, I don't think a cookie should be your favorite food, but it's one of my favorite foods.
No, definitely. I think one of my favorite Christmas foods is making Christmas cookies. And even if I don't eat them, I'm just making them for my neighbors and passing them out. That's Christmas. One of the things you have to do is that and make a gingerbread house and decorate it. Those are the 2 things that I have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
John, you touched on
your childhood sounds magical.
Well, I was very lucky. I have a really great family.
Yeah. Awesome. So what about Christmas song? Do you have a favorite Christmas song?
Wow. Well, I tend to really like the period in our history of like the 40s and 50s kind of big bands, kind of like swing big band era. And I love old movies. So I really love Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole. Um, White Christmas is one of my favorites. And also, I think it's Judy Garland, I'll Be Home for Christmas are two of my favorite songs. Yeah. But I need to add with the German side of my family, I speak other languages, but not German, sadly. And growing up, my cousins went to a school where they had German even as little kids. And so we always seem to hear a round of Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, Silent Night in German. I love hearing it, but I can't sing it.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You have such a traditional in the American sense, the culture, like the blending pot, that your family has so many cultures and uniquely together. So the last question that person asked was about your favorite movie. What's your favorite, holiday movie, be it Christmas or another holiday? What's your favorite
Oh,
movie?
yeah. I love the movie Elf. Um, it is sort of a more modern movie, but it's just such a charming and delightful movie. And it just gets to the heart of what makes Christmas such a special holiday. Um, but also, if I can say, I have my own Russian tradition favorite too. Being here during the holidays, I noticed that this movie, Slokomparem or Ironia Sudbi, where this guy gets and ends up going to the banya with his friends and drinking a little too much and wakes up in Leningrad. That is one of my favorite movies. So on New Year's, I always try to watch this movie. If I'm in Russia, it's always on TV. But if I'm not in Russia, I still like to watch it wherever I am.
Agreed. I've also watched that movie. Love Actually is one of my favorite Christmas movies.
Oh,
And my
yes.
husband, who's a better Russian speaker than I am, tried to convince me to watch the other movie. He said it's like the Russian Love Actually. So,
Oh, could it be Office Romance, Служебный Roman, maybe?
well, no, it's the New Year's movie you mentioned. In
Oh,
his
oh,
mind, he
Slow
didn't like it because it's
Yes,
like different people
yes,
interacting and their lives kind of crossing, and they didn't mean to for it to cross. So, yeah, we've
yes.
also watched that.
Yeah, I
So,
think, Jahan, you're right. Love Actually is like a must-see holiday
yeah.
movie.
Yes, and I also like the Christmas Story, that really old movie about the boy who wants the BB gun for Christmas.
Yes.
Um, it's
And if
interesting
I,
though that
oh, I'm sorry. Please
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was gonna say old movies in the US sometimes that are made for kids. When I watch them and now and I see them with kids, I go, "Ooh, there's a lot of profanity in that movie." So it's a movie that I thought was for children because I watched it growing up, and then I showed it to some nieces and nephews a couple years ago, and then I thought, "Oh wow, there's maybe you shouldn't watch this movie," but it's a good
Yes.
movie.
Yes, I agree. It probably changes your perspective a lot to be around kids when they are on. I got a question recently about Home Alone, and I remember being a kid watching Home Alone and loving that movie too. But as an adult, I wouldn't say watch it every Christmas or anything like that. So,
Yes.
um, also, A Charlie Brown Christmas is a pretty
Mhm.
neat cartoon. It's 50 years old now, but the message is still pretty neat. Just
And
about
I also
yeah. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I agree. I also like to watch the animated, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Jack Frost, Frosty the Snowman, all of
Yeah.
those kind of animated classics in America. I like to watch them around the holidays. Usually if you turn on your TV in the US in the month of December, one of those movies is playing on some channel in the month of December.
It's so true. It's so true. And I feel like with all our efforts to make things faster and more fun and more gripping, those claymation, I don't know exactly what they were, but those little kids movies from the 60s are pretty great.
Great. Okay, so we have another question about What are the popular tourist destinations in America for Christmas and New Year? So if a Russian tourist was coming to America for
Mhm.
Christmas, our Christmas or Orthodox Christmas, and New Year's, where should they go?
Wow, that is a really great question. It's a little hard right now to answer because of the pandemic, because I can't imagine any of the places that we would typically want to go being open for tourists, or if they are open, you have to be a little bit more careful. And one case in point being New York City, which is seeing a resurgence right now in COVID cases. But New York, I had the pleasure of being in New York one time on Times Square. I was on a service project, so we were actually serving the homeless at the time. Wasn't there just to watch the ball drop, but it was so, and I don't think I saw the ball drop, but just being in New York City with the energy. Oh, another Christmas book and movie that I absolutely love, the original in black and white, is Miracle on 34th Street. And so to be at Macy's on around Christmas and then in Times Square was pretty special. So I would say if you haven't been to New York, you must go to New York. Another place I might recommend is the American West, like Aspen, Colorado, or Park City, Utah. Some of those places, if you like to ski, can be really a neat place to go in the winter. May not be the cheapest time of year to go, but definitely a great place to make a memory. And then as an adult, I did not grow up in Arizona, but I lived in Arizona for almost 10 years. Consider myself in some ways an Arizonan. And being in Phoenix, Arizona at Christmas time, seeing Christmas lights on the cactuses and the palm trees, that was pretty memorable too. So I really enjoyed that.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people feel like Christmas has to be somewhere cold with snow and, evergreen trees, but I take a beach in Hawaii any day on Christmas. If someone wants to pay for a Christmas vacation, but they want to go somewhere in the US, I would say go to Hawaii,
Yes.
Hawaii, and lay on the beach for Christmas. But I agree, probably the most iconic place to be on New Year's is Times Square in New York City, and probably being in Colorado skiing for Christmas would be awesome. All right,
Yes.
so we have another question about
Okay.
common presents. What's the most common present to get for Christmas? And if you really can't answer that, which I can't imagine, I'm not sure what you're going to say. What about your favorite Christmas gift you ever got in your entire life? Your favorite
Oh,
gift?
well, thank you. I've been thinking about that too, and I don't know if I could pick the most common because I think for kids anyway, it changes year to year. And it changes generation to generation. So the things that I enjoyed getting in my childhood probably wouldn't even be that popular nowadays. But one of my most favorite Christmases was, I shared this with some friends the other day, and that is um, I grew up on a farm, and so it was very difficult for my family to take vacations in the summer because my dad had to keep his eyes on the corn and soybeans growing and whatnot. And so we went on winter vacations to go skiing, usually in Michigan. And one year I got skis for Christmas, and usually we just rented the skis because we didn't go skiing often. But this getting up in the morning and coming down and seeing skis under the tree, I'll never forget. That was pretty exciting.
I can imagine. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. How about you? Do you have a favorite memory from or a favorite present you got?
So, I can't remember a specific present, but I do remember one Christmas. So we did get the stockings from Santa Claus, and one year, and we all had our own stockings, and I had an older sister, and for some reason, and I knew this happened, but I didn't want to admit to it. Santa Claus gave me her things in my stocking, so I got lipstick, and I got like all this cool stuff, and she was like, "No, that's probably mine. This is your stocking." I was like, "No, this is my stocking. Santa gave this to me." So I got all this cool stuff. And she's 5 years older than me. So I got all these mature, products, which I didn't even use, I think. But it was just the thought that I think I had a CD, or not a CD, I had a video cassette, and I had lipstick, and I had like, I didn't,
Oh,
and it was kind of cool to have like the grown stuff.
you were
Um,
the envy of all the girls that year, I'm sure.
yeah, I'm sure. And one thing I wanted to say, actually, coming to think of it, there is one common thing some people have is fruitcake, which I don't like, but it seems like people do give fruitcake in America for Christmas. Some people give that to their neighbors or pass it out. I don't like fruitcake. I mean, it's like, it sounds kind of good, but it's like a bread with nuts and fruit in it, but
Yeah,
fermented fruit, like fruit that's
yeah.
like soaked in alcohol or something. I don't know, and put in a bread dish.
I have to agree with you. It's one of those things when you're a child and you see it and it's got different colored fruit in it, you're like,
Mhm.
ooh. And then you bite into it and you're like, no.
Yeah, yeah. Could you imagine it's like gummies,
Yeah,
are sweet and it's not sweet. So I think fruit cake might be one of those traditional things you get in the holidays. Okay,
but
so it's
oh, I was just going to mention though, you said baking cookies, that you bake cookies for your family and your friends, and I think you've just hit on a really important tradition. Growing up in my family too, my mom baked all the time, and we would have like a cookie baking day where we would just make a bunch of different kinds of cookies and then set out a bunch of plates, like 20 different plates, and fill them all up for our neighbors and then drive around and deliver them to people. I would say that's a gift that people give each other,
mhm.
some sort of baked goods or cookies,
Yeah,
probably
I
pretty
agree.
common.
I agree. Okay, so we had a question about Home Alone, but I think we've kind of answered it. They wanted to know, do people usually watch Home Alone during the winter holidays because they play it in Russia on TV for Christmas and New Year's.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think for a few years, I remember on one side of my family, I'm the oldest of many cousins, something around 20 now. I haven't counted in recent years,
Mhm.
but we've got a lot of cousins. So the house is always just lots of toys and the big kids holding the babies and all of that. And for many years, Home Alone was on. I just remember it being on like every Christmas.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah, that's true.
definitely on. Yeah.
Um, uh, so holidays are fun and exciting, but they can also be stressful. And someone asked, which holidays do you consider to be stressful? Or what part, or maybe even what part of the holiday season is stressful?
Yeah. I think because the Christmas holiday is like a longer period, um, with the month of December leading up to time off, leading up to a bunch of family events. Um, that might be one of the more stressful holidays than others that I can think of. But you're touching on an interesting topic, Jahan, and thank you to the person who asked the question. I have two thoughts. One is the pandemic has sort of changed everything right now because we don't have some of these stresses right now, but we have others. And just traditionally, what does this mean for our culture? So I'll just speak to the traditional part and then flip to the pandemic. Traditionally, I would say one downside of Christmas or the holidays, if I would just call the collective holidays of gift giving, Christmas, Passover, Kwanzaa, can put them all in the month of December, and then New Year's, is that there's financial pressure on people because it's so common to give gifts. And you have to think of people you work with and people you're friends with and people you have to give to in your family. And it's not a have to, but you feel like you want to. And so I think in terms of stress, for some families, that can be a lot of pressure. Um, and also, time management. Your every weekend and many weeknights are filled with school events, kids' events, parties, holidays, wrap up for school. If you're a college student, you're taking your finals. It's just like, it can be really stressful to the point that when you get to Christmas, I had a couple Christmases when I was in college where you get sick over the holidays because your immune system is just so burned out. But turning to the pandemic, I think the pressures of traditional holiday periods, uh, the pressure to see people, the pressure to give everyone a present, the pressure to run around and shop on Black Friday and get all your discount gifts, all those pressures are a bit gone because we're kind of in lockdown and not all of us are able to go out and do as much of that. But we have other pressures. And I would say, should we travel this year, our families? Some of us have to make that decision. Do we get a COVID test? Are we sick with COVID? And also just the stress of not seeing and hugging the people that you love. So I just want to put my wish out there for everyone watching that hopefully you're taking self-care and time for yourself to take care of your own personal and mental health needs during the season, because it can be very overwhelming. And one way to help that is to schedule a Zoom, schedule a video chat with your friends and your family, because the pandemic has forced us to think about what's the most important thing in my life. Is it really all these things we buy, all these things we do, all these activities, or is it the people I love? And I would say it's the people we love.
That's beautiful. No, I agree. I think that that's the sad part of the holidays is the Christmas holidays, the winter holidays are that they sometimes so much pressure to make them perfect. There's so
Yeah.
much pressure to buy the gifts and to do things. And Santa, I love him to death, but sometimes Santa makes it worse because I've definitely been around kids who've said, "Well, why did Santa buy this person a bike and Santa didn't buy me a bike?" I'm like, "Because your Santa couldn't afford a bike." Well, how come Santa can buy, this person all these things and Santa didn't do this for me, or Santa only gave me this last year, Santa did this. And so and I remember as a kid, my mom, worked so hard. And sometimes there was like layaway, which I don't know if you have in Russia, but you could buy something in advance and you pay on it, which is a horrible system because you end up paying more than it's worth. But people would pay on things and then you would get it off layaway. So I just remember one day my mom saying, "I'm not doing this Christmas stuff anymore. Like, you're going to get what I can afford. You're not going to get more." And it was actually better. We're fine. But, Christmas, for me, I celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah has gifts and Kwanzaa has gifts, whatever celebration with gifts, you have the expectation of buying things. So as long as you remember, it's about the people in the family. It's about the reason for the season and not gifts. Yeah, no, I think you'll be fine. Okay, so let's move on to how much time we get off. So someone said,
Oh,
Russia is you have very long holidays, commonly 10 days. This person said sometimes it's boring. I would love to be bored with vacation, but they want to know it's boring, but sometimes you can visit and you can travel and visit relatives. And they wanted to know, do we get long holidays in the US?
wow. Well, that is a great question and a good way to maybe talk about, just like the last question, talk a little bit about our culture. Um, I would say that I really love in Russian culture that you take a serious break in the winter, and really enjoy your holidays to the point that when you go back, you are ready to go back to the office. I think it depends on the office and the person you are. I have known some people, someone I work with who maybe has 2 or 3 or 4 kids, and their parents are coming from another state, and they say, "I'm taking 2 weeks off because my family's coming and I have to bake, I have to prepare." But many Americans don't get a lot of vacation time, or they must work to make income for their families. And so they cannot take even a week off at Christmas. And people working shifts. I was a journalist. I had to work the Christmas Eve. I had to work Thanksgiving. That's not always fun, or be the reporter that went out on New Year's Eve and interviewed drunk people. um, but enjoying the parties. But Also medical workers, restaurant workers, people that just don't work a traditional weekday work week. I think it's worth noting that both are okay, because this person that asked the question, you can get kind of bored taking that many days off. Um, but it's also a nice rest. And I think the same case could be made in the summer that Russians, Europeans tend to take a few weeks off, and it's solid rest where they travel or go away from their home area. I don't think Americans are really accustomed to taking that many weeks off usually, unless you're a teacher, professor, something where you actually get a break when students get a break. Um, I don't know if one is good or bad or better than the other, but I think breaks are nice to have. And I'm not sure if I'm frozen.
I sometimes feel like we are not always able or authorized able to take off as much time. And we definitely don't have the federal holiday. We have a question about in the U.S. Embassy. What traditions do we have for New Year's inside the embassy?
Okay. So, Jahan, maybe I'll share the consulate traditions we've had, and maybe you can share the embassy side since I haven't necessarily been here for a Christmas
Sure.
or winter break before. Um, so here in Russia, I'm serving in Vladivostok and have served in our St. Petersburg consulate, and I would say we usually had a Thanksgiving party, 4th of July party, and then a Christmas or like a winter holiday party. Usually they're potluck where we were a smaller sized group, but big enough. Our American and Russian staff would get together. We would share a meal, salads and potatoes and cookies and turkey, sometimes beef or pork, like a lot of meat, a lot of good food. And then in all the places I've been, we have sung traditional Russian holiday songs and American holiday songs, carols. And it was such an amazing way to experience both holidays and share each other's music, sing in Russian, sing in English. Those are my favorite memories.
Great. Yeah. So in the embassy here in Moscow, I can talk about what we did last year. In the non-COVID times, there was a party at the ambassador's house, Spaso House, for local staff, for all Americans, all Russians, and they could bring their children, their significant others, and we were all able to come. Santa Claus came. Dred Moroz, the Russian Santa Claus came, and his like little sister, or I don't know, someone correct me. His like family. He comes with who?
Nigorechka.
Nicoritza, right. She came and Mrs. Claus and Mr. Claus, Santa Claus, they came and they took pictures and we, everyone bought something to share for food. So it was a huge potluck. And there was a talent show for the kids singing and dancing, playing musical instruments. And then for our friends of the embassy usually get little gifts or presents. So this year I know that everyone's going to get a virtual like card, and that there's a concert. There's going to be a virtual concert, but unfortunately, with COVID, out of an abundance of caution, we're not going to have gifts delivered because we don't want all our drivers to have to come in and people to have to pack the gifts, and it's not necessarily safe. And also, we're not going to have the big party at the ambassador's house this year due to COVID-19. But hopefully, next year, I'm hopeful that things will be better and we'll continue those traditions. But now we're doing lots of online traditions. I know Aaron and I will be attending an online holiday party tomorrow for public affairs staff, and it's the important thing is that we are together and that we are able to see people and communicate, and we can do that with the beautiful internet. And in the future, we'll get together in person again.
That was perfectly said. Yes, we sure hope so. I think that this talk and getting to hear about your traditions as well, Jahan, has been really a wonderful memory for me too of this time. And I hope that everyone watching will also enjoy the holiday with their families.
Me too. And we actually have one last question. I didn't realize it's over 7 o'clock, but if you have time, we'll ask her this one last question.
I have all the time in the world.
Okay. It is, what is your favorite Russian holiday? Since you have such a great Russian experience with St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, Moscow, what's your favorite Russian holiday?
Oh my goodness, that is such a hard one. I love them all. Well, each one kind of carries its own kind of spot in my heart, I would say. The holidays in Russia, I think, get culturally at the Russian soul, this idea of the Russian soul, that these amazing artistic, cultural, historical ties that bind culture together. I think New Year's is pretty unique. I've never been in a place, and I remember this mostly from St. Petersburg, but I've never been in a place where I heard fireworks literally all night long. The fireworks there were pretty incredible, and the downtown area in Vladivostok was also lit with holiday lights, a skating rink, a giant tree, and then they had like an alley of just blue lights where you could take your picture. So I would say New Year's sticks with me. I've always thought that Victory Day was a pretty incredible holiday, and during our time in St. Petersburg, remembering the blockade and the courage of the Russian people that survived the siege of Leningrad has always kind of stuck with me. And then some of the Orthodox holidays, particularly Easter, and the fasting traditions, and then the Easter saying prayers and having your basket of eggs blessed in the middle of the night as the dawn is breaking, that sticks with me too.
Perfect. Those are all awesome. Well, those are different unique experiences that we can have in Russia, which I'm very pleased to be here to experience Russian traditions and learn culture. And I look forward to those experiences as well, the rest of my assignment here. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We wish you happy holidays, whichever holidays you are celebrating. And please come back and enjoy the future videos and things we have with the American Center Online. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Jahan. Happy holidays, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.